This episode of the Western Outdoor News Podcast is brought to you by Penn. Every bite on the water is just the beginning of a gear testing battle of man versus fish. In this game, there are no ties. Since 1932, Penn has equipped saltwater anglers worldwide with gear built specifically to deliver an advantage over angry fish that's as reliable as the tide tables. Penn's new Workhorse Battle 3 spinning reel with proprietary CNC gear technology and the proven durability of an HT100 carbon fiber drag system comes in 9 sizes to allow anglers to take the battle to the fish wherever they swim. Go to pennfishing.com and let the battle begin.
I'd be looking at those foamers and I'd be going, oh, those are small enough. I think those are small enough. And you get up there and go like, they're not that small.
Hey folks, and welcome back to the Western Outdoor News Podcast. This week we talked to Luke from RHA Tackle. Luke and I talk about how RHA came to be, the product he offers, and the message behind RHA Tackle.
Honestly, man, it's just a lot of excitement here from RHA Tackle and just every day's a grind, you know.
We then get the chance to sit down again with our saltwater editor, Merit. We talk about bass, barracuda, bluefin, yellowtail, and dorado making a push up the beach.
Sure enough, all of a sudden that slick erupted into 3 or 4 spots of fish just foaming on the surface.
You're not going to want to miss out on this one, folks. All right, so let's just jump right in here with Luke from RHA Tackle. Kind of go through how you got into and why you got into making your own spoons, and now you're marketing them, and it seems like people are doing really well.
Yeah, man. So it started back actually when COVID hit. It's a blessing in disguise because it gave me an opportunity to follow the passion and pursue something that I actually been meaning to do since a kid, essentially. It all started, essentially, I got laid off, and then I just put everything I could into my business. I went to school and I got a degree in business, and I needed to push that passion and activate that potential into something. This is where I channeled all my energy, and I haven't looked back since.
So you're actually custom painting and, putting the hooks and stuff on these jigs and spoons.
Yes, sir.
What's your passion? It looks like it's trout, salmon, that kind of stuff. But these things probably work for just about anything and everything, I would imagine.
Yeah, actually, down in SoCal, I got some YouTubers, the Sea Spanker. He's a really good fisherman. I made him pro staff angler. He's been testing them out and been activating on the SoCal scene. Even though it's been the off season for trout, these guys have been slaying down there. I got him in Purdy Outdoors on the team as far as the YouTube staff right now, and only growing. So you can check them out and see some of the catches over there.
What are they fishing for?
So they're fishing for crappie, bass, trout, primarily trout. But since it's summer, a lot of things are biting, and these spoons are extremely effective on many species of fish. It doesn't matter where you're at. These things are going to get bit. So, we've been testing them in Hawaii, over at Maui. They've been getting some triggerfish. Over in Colorado, over in Arizona, New Mexico, we're all over the place now, and only growing. So very excited for the future and what it has to hold for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. So where are you guys located at, actually?
I'm actually out at NorCal over in San Jose. So I'm frequently doing the East Bay lakes. That's where I started over when I did my trout fishing. Over there at Parkway, actually. It's now closed down because of a lot of things that happened, legally speaking. However, that's where I got my trout foot in the door as a little kid. Got to go over Shasta, Orville, all the Lake Berryessa, a bunch of hatcheries as a child, and that just got me started. And now it's been in a bunch of foothill lakes, Amador, Collins. I just got back from a McSwain trip where I was slaying a bunch of brookies and holdovers. So
very cool. That's awesome, man. Have you been getting these things out in the salt and fishing for? I know there's a little bit of a salmon bite happening up your way, off Santa Cruz, and then, even further north. It's been pretty good. Have you gotten on any of that lately?
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. Over at Mulligan's, our last trip, actually, we got a nice 20-pounder off my size 4 watermelon troller. And it seems that those things have just been taken off. Everyone that's been using them in Santa Cruz, I got a buddy Barbosa Fishing over there. He's been slaying them every time he's been using them, it seems. Doesn't matter really the patterns, the golds, the blacks, the silvers, the reds, the blues, the silvers, the straight silvers, the golds. The watermelon seems to be the most popular and the most effective pattern that I got right now, which has been really really good. So I've been trying to add some UV tapes and different things, glows. So I'm going to have some glow series and UVs coming up here pretty soon. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's cool to just kind of watch, something a little different than what's been already out there, and you're putting your own spin on it, and it seems to be taking off pretty good. It seems like you got quite a following, and obviously you're up on our radar now, and with that salmon bite going on up north, it's just exciting stuff. It's really can't wait to see what happens here in the near future.
Honestly, man, it's just a lot of excitement here from RHA Tackle, and just every day's a grind. We have a lot of sleepless nights over here, and it's a 24-hour, I want to say, addiction. So follow the trend and get hooked, man, and that's what it's all about. Just following that passion and that love, and finding that drive for what you want to do, and just taking off with it. And that's what we promote over here, is just learning, educating, promoting, and growing as a person and an angler. It's
just so cool to see. I know you show, real hooked anglers, and then underneath it says real: respect, educate, elevate, and learn.
Yep.
So that message right there is pretty clear. And I think we're going to keep seeing good things coming from you. And it's been so cool. We were actually talking earlier about how these smaller tackle, custom tackle companies are popping up. We just talked to Ghoulie Jigs a few weeks back. Now we're talking with you. Who knows what's next? And it's exciting. It's fun. It's new stuff that's not available to everyone in the beginning, but it becomes more and more available as you guys grow, and people are starting to see what the potential is with this custom style tackle.
True. I feel that we are a secret that's just on the cusp of people figuring it out. And these flutter spoons are just a little niche in the arsenal in anyone's tackle box that I feel can work the water column from the lower water column all the way up to the upper, depending on how fast or slow your retrieve method is. So, I mean, I like to use the 4 grams personally, because I could have more of a freestyle cast and retrieve method where I can do the stop and pauses, or I can just, have a straight retrieve. But my 3 grams are more of the beginner sizes with a constant speed and a flutter, whereas the 4 grams, you can have a little freestyle effect with that, which I like.
Have you done any just vertical jigging with them at all?
The last time we were over at Mulligan's, I had a little test of my 4 ounce and 6 ounce weighted rock cod, ling cod jigs. So I've been doing some of those as some experiments, and those have been doing really well. We got a nice ling cod this last time and over 40 rock cod off of them. However, the testing for the spoons, as far as vertical jigging goes, I haven't put too much field tests into that. However, this next trip, I will get back to you on that.
Yeah, with that bigger size, I could see it, reaching into that bass community, even for a vertical style presentation, especially as summer keeps going on and we have the shad die-offs in some of those lakes. It's really just such a universal bait that's so simple and so underutilized, I feel like, in a lot of the fishing community.
That's completely accurate. That's where I noticed that, and I just wanted to integrate this tackle into the fishing community, because I personally used it and felt that it was just something that people didn't know. It was the best kept secret, I felt, and I just wanted people to see what I saw and just activate that potential.
you got stuff in research and development as far as some heavier saltwater gear, it sounds like,
Yep.
and making some heavier spoons. So that's also some really exciting stuff to come, especially with, down here in SoCal. I'm sure you've heard the big bluefin and stuff. And if you make some big heavy duty spoons, they're hard to come by right now. And it seems to be sold out everywhere you go. And this flutter style heavy spoon is something that's really effective on these big bluefin even.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually do have a field developer or field tester down in. He's going to go take a trip to Mexico here within the next couple of weeks and test some of those pyramid spoons out actually from the shore. So we're going to get some shore casting and see how that surf cast game goes with these guys. So
yeah, that's an awesome fishery as well. It's that's what I'm saying. It's this such a simple jig, such a simple style lure that is really just can be used in almost every situation.
That's the best part about it, man. That's how I feel. I want to make one specific spoon that I know I can have the confidence to throw at any time. And of course, fishing is fishing, so every day is different. You got to figure out that color, that size, the whole problem you got to solve. So it's a mathematical equation where you systematically got to approach it. And without that systematic approach, then the information that you're gathering isn't going to be too valid. So you have to be aware of every cast, and every cast counts. So it's very important.
Yeah. Well, I know. So I've fished up your way quite a bit. I lived in Monterey for a little bit, and I did a lot of bass fishing and stuff. That's one of my main things. And one place we used to fish a lot was Loch Lomond. Mm-hmm. Do you ever get out there?
Unfortunately, I haven't been out to Loch Lomond since I was a kid. I was talking to the gentleman over there trying to schedule a trip. However, I didn't get a chance to make it out there this year. However, in these coming years, it'd be a good opportunity to get out there, and I think our tackle would definitely slay out there on some of those holdovers.
Yeah, are they stocking? Do you know if they're stocking still, or do they? I know when I was fishing it quite a few years back, they had stopped stocking. I'm not sure what the situation is up north with you guys right now.
Yeah, as far as stocking goes, I know it's the non scheduled. Essentially, they're not telling it to public as far as that goes due to the whole COVID inflation of fishermen. So,
okay.
Since that hit, I feel that these whole East Bay lakes and all the different lakes up here north, they did not want to tell the public anything because of the fact that everyone was just showing up on that day, and it was just shoulder to shoulder and a bunch of people. So there wasn't really COVID restrictions being followed properly by everyone. So
okay,
it was a deterrent for them.
Yeah. It's crazy how so many more anglers came out of the woodworks when that happened, right?
Honestly, it's a good thing and a bad thing, man. Like that's kind of what helped the whole pursuit of this, because I wanted to help educate those people that didn't have those same values that I was taught from my father, as far as respecting the nature and just being able to harvest that food and respectfully take care of the things. Don't leave your trash. Don't disrespect the environment. Don't disrespect the creatures. It's all about maintaining that subsistence lifestyle and being able to pass it on to future generations is what my whole passion and values are held and what I was taught. So I'm just trying to make sure all these newbies know that that's the values that we should hold to make sure that this is a continued thing for our generations. And that's what I feel very strong about.
Exactly, man. It's just, having that respect for, even at the park lakes, it's so sad to see sometimes just the trash that's laying around, and I always try to pick up, and it's just sometimes I'm dumbfounded by what you'll find on the ground, and people aren't respecting, even the parks. It's like, yeah, there's a guy that goes around and cleans the park up, but it's also your responsibility if you bring trash.
True. Honestly, it's funny that people don't realize the common sense aspects of that, and to leave things how they were, if not better. So I agree with you, and I like to do the same thing whenever I'm at a location. Is I'll clean it up. I'll bring a bag and I'll make sure that it's not messy.
Well, Luke, it was good talking to you. Super stoked we finally got to hook up and talk about these awesome spoons that you're making and outfitting with quality components and custom painting. I just see it growing and growing, and I'm excited to see what comes.
Really appreciate you having me on today, Daniel, and I'm looking forward to future conversations.
And here's Merit with the SoCal saltwater scene.
Regulation in the local waters right now.
Yeah, I'd say so. What have you been up to? You've been doing a little bit of fishing yourself?
Yeah, Wendy and I went and did like a twilight look at tuna and stayed out into the dark out of when those fish showed up off of, well, first all the way up to Dana, and then we came out of Oceanside. Talked to Rick Slavkin there a little bit at the dock and headed out, and we went and watched fish, and then we're very hopeful in the dark, but it didn't happen for us.
Did you have your skiff down this way?
Yep, I drug it down there.
Very cool. Yeah, we launched Sunday morning, and we're able to get on some fish right off of Oceanside. We found a little spot of we went to a zone where my buddy saw him the night before, started seeing life, pulled it back. Sure enough, started looking around, followed the dolphin around for a little bit, marked a little bit of fish, and had some maybe yellowfin pop up next to him. And then all of a sudden, all around us, the bluefin just started going crazy. So,
nice.
Yeah, and we pulled in, we hooked one on the surface iron, shook it off, and then I hooked another one, almost spooled me. I was fishing 40-pound, bummer on my part. 2.5 hours later, and I'm pretty sure a shark got it. It fully stopped, couldn't move the fish. I pulled it up once, and then something latched onto it and just was swimming away, and I couldn't do anything about it.
Man, heartbreaker.
Yeah, full on. We just tucked our tail between our legs and came straight in.
For that time, the plumber was gone and the birds had left.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was up around the boat while we were fighting the fish, just at a casting distance. Couldn't get a second one on, but yeah, it's just how it is, right?
That's tuna fishing.
How was your tuna watching those? You guys see it pretty good?
Yeah, we went out there. I started out up sun so I could see down into the area, and it was, it was getting towards sunset. Saw a little flat spot of slick, and then kind of followed that along, and there was a big, fat, dead sea lion, or it was probably bigger than like an elephant seal floating in the middle of it, and we followed it a little bit more, and sure enough, all of a sudden that slick erupted into 3 or 4 spots of fish just foaming on the surface. We tried to get up into them, but I could never really get the bait. We were throwing iron at them. Mm-hmm. Could never really get it into them before they sank out. And we tried stealth and everything. Yeah.
No, it was, we lucked out. It's funny. I think we were in the same zone. I did see a big dead elephant seal or big sea lion in the zone. And it might have been a few days later. It was up a little further north maybe. But yeah, it's definitely time to go fishing. They're spread out from Mexico to probably almost all the way up your way, right?
Yep. It was pretty quick when they first showed up off of like the golf balls and that, and then they were up there off Dana, and then it was the next morning where I got the first report all the way from the Channel Islands.
Yeah. Well, besides that big bluefin that's around, it seems like that big stuff's starting to stack up outside Clemente, but besides all that, the barracuda fishing was just about insane. I think they're still catching limits of barracuda on a lot of these trips. Yep.
It's impressive. That fish just kind of moved in, and they were chasing it around out there on the flats, on the Huntington Flats and up in San Pedro and like that. And then it looks like it kind of just settled in on the Horseshoe Kelp and a couple of other zones, and the boats are going out there, the Enterprise, and I saw the Sport King out there, and even the Pursuit was there for a little morning go-around. They were anchored up, lined up there by the green buoy and throwing bait. It's good to have a tank full of bait, let me tell you. You can be on a skiff and hope one little spot comes by you, but if you're on a sport boat, you're in there. And those fish came up splashing, guys were throwing the iron. Saw Two of them flipped over the railing at a time over there on the Sport King.
Yeah, it's fighting, that's for sure. I was just reading, the Skinny on Fish and Scooters, and you're talking about the surface iron stuff and fishing the fixed jig hook. I've done it a lot for the tuna and stuff as well. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Let's talk about those jigs and how that came to be. I actually just had my buddy send me a bunch of pictures of them. He's out in the garage right now building them up.
Well, it's pretty old school. And as you know, barracuda are no fun to touch. They got a lot of teeth and a lot of slime. And once you get the slime on you, you think, oh, well, I got slime. But then you try to fish and you find out you can't even hang on to the rod anymore. And then you're trying to figure out how to get it off your hand. And there's all kinds of tricks, whether it's smashing a sardine and then whatever. But the real trick is never to get it on your hand in the first place. And the way you do that is you fix that hook onto the jig. And so you can just turn the jig upside down and the fish comes off onto the deck. And hopefully it's fast fishing. You scoot that guy out of the way and make another cast real quick. When it comes right around to handling the fish, you can pick it up by its pelvic fins with your dikes if you handle them gently and put them into the ice chest.
That's the way to do it. And keeping those fish fresh is, a lot of people don't realize the table fare of a barracuda. And I've done it quite a bit. And I know a lot of my friends really like keeping them, but a lot of these guys think that barracuda are not good eating. And that's just something that's not true, at least in my in my opinion. I don't know about you, but
it's just one of those fish. When you get them, you get a bunch of them. People just tend not to appreciate fish that much when you get a bunch of them. Everybody's trying to one up each other. And if everybody's getting them, people start saying, well, they're no good anyway, just because they didn't catch one.
Yeah, exactly. It's like same thing with the bonito. And, if you take care of it, it comes out real good.
So with that in mind, we had a day where we had a bunch of sea bass and a few barracuda, and they were all kind of mixed together. And I think we pulled in there off of inside of Forney's just to kind of kick back a little bit, fish a little bit of bass and like that. And so I cut a barracuda and I cut a sea bass, and we threw both on the grill side by each, cooked them both up, and I swear to God, you could not tell the difference that fresh.
Yeah, and it comes down to taking care of it. Some of my favorite sashimi and poke bowls have come from bonito, and it's just one of those things. I think it's like you said, you get into those ripper bites where there's so many on deck, and people think it's just like a junk fish. Why would I eat this? But it's actually, I think there is a time, and you even touched on it, barracuda were at a high price commercially.
So in like the 1920s, there's a big commercial fishery for them. And that's where a lot of this speed technology for barracuda fishing actually comes from. It's really, really old school. And there are big jig boats like albacore, set up like albacore jig boats. And they would fish, a feather, a little sinker and a feather, and just medium slow troll it around. And it was a big deal. In the 50s, it was still legal to sell sport caught fish. And, guys would go out there. Milton Love, he would go out there and he'd catch bass and barracuda, and you would get $1 for a barracuda and only like a quarter for a bass. And so that was the relative value. Now, back then, $1 was worth a lot more. It's like a $10 bill now. A buck then was like $10. So you get essentially $2.50 for a calico bass, and you get $10 for a barracuda. That was a split in the value in people's minds. And then since then, I don't know what it was. It was some cultural demand. Maybe their gefilte fish thing was one thing that they did with them. I don't know. But that super high value that they held then kind of melted away.
Yeah, it's just weird that people, they are fun to catch. And if you take care of them, they're good to eat. And it's weird that the stigmatism behind them is kind of, they're slimy, Don't eat them.
I can tell you, they have a really thick backbone, real wide, right? Mm-hmm. So if you just slab them out, you don't get much off of them. And sometimes, guys will just slab them out and then cut those ribs out and throw it on. You get like this, looks like a belt of barracuda skin with a little meat on it. There's a lot more meat on a barracuda than that. All you got to do is do it the old school salmon split style. Just come down the backbone to the vertebrae and flip it up a little bit, go over the backbone and out the belly of the fish on the other side, and you get quite a chunk of meat out of it.
Yeah, it's like cutting a dorado, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Yeah. Outline them.
Just for example, if you were to try to slab a halibut the way that you cut like a bass or something like that, you get like nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just said dorado, and it sounds like there's been some dorado coming up through the zone here. Already a few fish between Catton and home here in Dana Point, and it sounds like more and more getting seen on kelps down below, along with quite a few yellowtail. It sounds like we're getting a little push.
Yeah, on I think it was the Triton or the Gale Force, one of those two boats, they sent in a picture. Jingler, who's the owner of the boats, she sent in a picture of a kid with a dorado they got off a kelp patty somewhere between San Pedro and Catalina. So up there all the way towards the west end, they found a kelp with a dorado on it and got it.
I saw that. Yeah, we reposted that on our social media. It was a cool dorado. I know there was one caught earlier last week as well by the bongos I saw.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple caught. I had a buddy down here in our zone fishing the 267 just a couple weeks ago and saw 4 or 5 of them on a kelp. Just couldn't get them to go. So there's fish moving into the zone, and I saw quite a few kelps last Sunday. We stopped on a few, and we didn't have bait. We just were tossing jigs, but we didn't see anything on the kelps. Nothing visual, at least.
Yeah, usually those dorados show pretty good if they're interested. You put a bait out there and rainbow out from the patty. They're funny fish. Those and the yellowtail. If you pull up to a kelp patty, everybody wants to throw on the kelp. But the reality is, especially with a big sport boat casting a big shadow, you pull up within like 100 feet or even like 200 feet of a kelp, and all of a sudden those fish are just charging the boat. And the trick is to get a sardine out there like between the boat and the kelp, but not too far from the boat. You just butt hook that thing and underhand it out there. And the funny thing is, if you want the dorado, use a crummy bait. If you want the yellow, use a good bait.
I can remember so many times with my customers, I'd do three passenger, 4 passenger charters at a Dana, and we'd pull up on a dorado kelp, and I'd get pretty close to the kelp, and my customers would all grab their rods and cast at the kelp, and I would just toss one back in the prop wash, and I'd get bit first. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny. So many times, more often than not, you'll see them come right up behind the boat and stare at the prop.
Oh yeah, they'll be right there buzzing around behind the boat, up and down.
Yeah,
quick too. And the funny thing is, if you hook a yellow underneath the kelp like that, pretty soon your line is up all the way up to the top, and it's all the way out of the water, and you got your rod held high, and then that line is pointed straight at the middle of the kelp.
Oh yeah. I couldn't tell you how many times I've had to back down onto a kelp with a good yellow in it for a customer. Especially on the skiff, you can do it. But when you're on a sport boat and you're up high and you get a fish in that kelp, you're probably going to lose that fish.
That just like calicos, when you pull on a fish in the weeds, it's the lines slides along the kelp stringer or through a stringer or something like that. And the fish is on the end of it. And pretty soon you get that fish nose into the weeds, right? And you're pulling on the line, and the hook is anywhere near the outside of the mouth where it's supposed to be, like on the lip or something like that. That stringer gets on there, and you pull it all tight, and that gives the fish the opportunity to shake, and then you end up with the fish gone and your hook hooked on the kelp.
Yeah, it's just like a butter knife when you're pulling bait off on your sabiki rig.
Yep, just like that.
Exactly. That's so funny. Yeah, it's happened many times to, I'm sure, both of us and our customers and stuff. And wow. Well, this tuna's, everything's happening. There's still some sea bass biting, I think, up north. Some good halibut fishing to be had up there. There's some squid bed fishing at Clemente, I've heard. Big yellows in the dark. Big bluefin now in the dark up off the back end of Clemente, and some fish on the flyers. And it just seems like go fishing now
Oh, absolutely. And I think, the sport fleet, they kind of spread out with a little nugget, looking over at Clemente, and some of the guys went down south. And that doesn't mean those fish they were fishing are gone. It just means that they got sick of dealing with the traffic and left it.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I noticed on Sunday. I noticed we pulled up on that spot of fish. There wasn't a boat around, and I had maybe 3 or 4 skiffs past us going way too fast to know what was going on, because they were all going to whatever someone else said or whatever they saw on the internet. They were traveling fast to a destination and passing. I was in a square mile of fish. I felt like it was everywhere I looked.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's pretty classic. What guys will do is, especially with modern electronics on a private boat, is that they'll learn the names, right? They'll learn the names of the spot, and they'll see them on the map, and they'll plug it in, beeline from spot to spot to spot that's known and named on the map. And so they don't actually cover any new turf at all. And they run over everything on those track lines between those spots so many times that every fish there is down. And people just don't realize that those pelagics, they are not on those high spots necessarily. They are on edges and current breaks and, things like that, structure that's in the surface of the water. And the thing to do is to fan out and take a look. And I can't tell you how much I learned by having a sonar and a pair of glasses. And you can find, I swear to God, you can find 70% of what you find with a sonar just with a pair of binoculars.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, in the skiff, the number one tool I have is I have a pair of Technostabies, and it is around my neck most of the day. If I'm not fishing, they're around my neck, and I'm looking around, and I stop the boat a lot more than a lot of people do. Being in a small skiff, you really got to pay attention. And if your boat goes fast, it's almost a double-edged sword, You pass over a lot of really good opportunity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in most boats, at 20 knots, their meters don't actually meter that way. You're not looking at anything.
Yeah. You might see a big blob of bait if it's not all just clutter on the screen.
Yep. So, the thing to do, you get out there, you see a flat spot or, an area where there's a lot of little floating kelp or whatever, where there's a current break of some kind piling that stuff up. It's time to stop and take a good look up and down that edge. And usually our edges run kind of northwest, southeast. So if you're at a loss for which way to run, just start kind of going nice and slow up and down, up one of those edges.
When I'm running out to a zone, I tend to always be looking out ahead, all around 360, but I'm also looking right down in the water. And the second I start to see little chunks of kelp broken apart, little pieces of eelgrass, stuff like that, I pull it back and I start to look, because I know that I'm getting into one of those spots, one of those zones where there's a ribbon of possible kelps. Oh, yeah. Or it's every little thing. Bubbles.
Even if there
you'll see those bubble lines.
Yep. Even if there aren't a bunch of kelps on a current break, those are areas that are likely to hold fish anyway, just somewhere along there. And what happens is that when cold water, or slightly colder water, meets warmer water, it goes underneath the cold water goes underneath the warm, and anything that was floating on top of that cold water ends up piling up, because, of course, it's not going to go down with that water. It piles up on that edge, and so that's your clue that there's a good current break right there. Even if it's a couple tenths of degrees and you can't even hardly tell, the surface condition, if you've got decent enough weather, it's not blowing 20 knots, you should be able to see the sign pretty strongly.
Yeah, you just follow those highways.
Yeah.
And it's another thing too with electronics nowadays and having a track line. A lot of people don't realize how, and maybe I shouldn't even be saying this, talking about like, this is what I've done for years, is when you find a kelp, and if you fish a kelp 4 or 5 passes, you now know which direction that kelp's going, and it's not necessarily going the way that you're drifting. Mm-mm. And so each time you come and do a loop to that kelp, you're drawing a line on which direction the kelp's going, and now you can go from where it came from or where it's going and usually find a line. And you might find out that those kelps are traveling in and out rather than up and down, or, diagonal across, coming from Cat, coming from Clemente, or maybe they're just coming straight off the beach and going straight out. It's always a little different.
That's a great trick. I like that.
And sometimes even if the kelp didn't bite, I would just drift off of it and come back to it at least once. And then I know, hey, that kelp's traveling this way. And it's the opposite way I'm drifting. I would get a grease pencil and throw a line on my plotter. And then I have essentially a heading kind of, or just with my compass. And now I know if I find a kelp or a zone, if I follow that line, I'm going to find a zone. And I'm going to be along a line that hopefully, find another kelp or even just fish.
That's definitely the way to do it. You're looking for that surface sign. The whole idea of just kind of like running to the numbers is just, it's a mistake.
Yeah, so many times more than, more often than not, you hear, I went to the 267, the 209, out to the ridge, the 181. We followed the ridge down. I'm like, oh, yeah, we were just in between them.
Yeah. And that water that you're looking at on a dead course between those high spots, been looked at several times that day already.
Yeah, I definitely don't take a heading towards any bank in the morning.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, whatever last night's dope is on where the fish were, that's definitely the place to start in the morning. But if it ain't going on there, you got to go look.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's as good as it's good for. If you have 2-day-old dope or 3-day-old dope, you're better off just to go on your own hunches and just start looking.
Yeah, because that night before dope is good for about, I'd say, 50% of the time.
Yeah, for the first few hours of the next morning.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. By 10 a.m., we didn't see a fish around us, and it was already up off Dana, and it came into like 200 feet of water that afternoon off the point.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. You could see it like literally from the beach.
I've heard that a couple of times. There are pictures of the old days where those bluefin, the big ones, were chasing flying fish in there inside a long point. And so, they would get in on the canyon in front of King Harbor and Redondo.
Yeah.
And like that. Nowadays, we tend to think of those fish as only in deep water. But those fish that they saw up there a few days ago between, let's see, Santa Cruz and Anacapa Island, those fish, they were in 180 feet of water.
Yeah, they're in the rockfish grounds pretty much, right?
Yep.
I, just a few years back, we were fishing sculpin down here off Pendleton, and we were on our way home, and I'm like, it was January. I'm like, those aren't dolphin. And we get out, and I look at the meter, and we're in 180 feet, and we slide in on this spot of bluefin, and they're eating the small flyers, the little, the
butterflies.
they're like 6 inches. Yeah, the butterflies, exactly. And they were just mowing through them, and we pulled up on a spot. I get a rip bait into one of them, a stick bait, and hook one, and I had it to the boat, and my customer didn't want to fight the fish. They were scared. I handed him the rod once, and it was like a 60 or 70 pounder. So I had him try to gaff it, and he fell down to his knees halfway across the deck, slid him up towards the bow of the boat, and then he let go of the gaff. Luckily, didn't pull him over, and wrapped my line in the gaff, popped, and then my gaff floated up about 2 minutes later.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm pretty sure while I was fighting that fish, he was hitting bottom, digging his face in the mud. Yeah.
It's a little bit harder to, it's easier to get one hooked on braid, but it's actually harder to keep one from tearing off a hook on braid. Have you noticed that? Oh yeah.
I fish a lot of monofilament for tuna. I fish big top shots, long leaders if I can. I try to stay away from straight braid and short leaders on the tuna fish. Yeah, that's for sure.
I've caught a few on the short leader, just a few feet of fluoro on the braid, and you have to keep the rod bent, and you have to be really careful not to tear those hooks out.
Yeah, you got to have a really parabolic, longer rod, and like I was undergunned the other day. I was on a Trinidad 30 full of 40-pound mono and a 9-foot jig stick. It was like my calico rod. Yeah. You're right. And I just got just taken. I was done. I couldn't do anything. I had the fish to the boat 3 or 4 times and just not close enough. He'd come up, I've noticed they come up to the surface just out of reach of the boat, and then they sound. They come up to the surface and then they sound. And it happened 3 or 4 times. And on that last time, something got it and it turned into a different fish at the end of my line.
Yeah, you never know. It's so heartbreak. Heartbreak comes in many colors.
Oh, yeah.
Comes in bluefin, it comes in white shark.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited for this next weekend. Maybe get out there and try to fish a little bit. Maybe get out, if I can, during the week. Maybe next week would be nice. I'm waiting on this new moon, I think, the next moon phase.
Yeah.
To really go chasing the big stuff. I don't know.
That local fishing has been just off the hook. I can't believe the numbers of bass that I'm seeing coming in out of San Diego on the half-day boats. And then that barracuda.
Big sand bass counts, right?
Oh, big sand bass counts from down below. Some good calico counts from up, in the weeds up off of La Jolla and along the point and that. That's just.
What are your thoughts on the sand bass and the sand bass spawn situation? You think we're going to see that up there in the clam beds or whatever they'd call it, off the golf ball and stuff ever again?
I don't know what has happened with that sand bass. There's some, suggestions I've heard that maybe the commercial fishery in Mexico is pretty hard on them. But it used to be whenever we would get like 70-degree water that would settle in, a surge of sand bass would come up the line, and they would keep on coming as long as there was warm water. So some years we had them all the way up onto the Ventura Flats in big numbers. And they would it was a funny thing. There was one skipper, Andy Velosky, he would talk about, we're going to go fish the shale for sand bass, right? And everybody up in the Channel Islands area always knew bass were on hard bottom, so the shale, right? He fished the shale for 10 years and knocked the pants off the sand bass while everybody else was busy looking for the rock, and they could never find the rock.
Yep.
And there was no shale. He would just go out there and find those fish in spawn mode.
Oh, yeah.
And the rest of us would just drive over them and go, there's no rock. I can't find the rock. Where's Andy's rock?
And when that sand bass is spawning like that, you can get them on the sonar, right?
Yeah. Usually there's so much schmutz, all kinds of stuff. It's hard to really tell. You see them on the up and down. If you get there were times you get a ball of sand bass on the sonar, a big red blob, and you could waste your life trying to anchor up on that ball.
Oh, yeah.
But you're just better off just to throw the hook and throw some bait.
Yeah. I remember the last time I fished it where it was like a proper spawn, it had to have been like, I was in high school, and I took my dad's skiff down there off the golf ball, and we were catching some yellows down there too, mixed in. And we would go down there with our yo-yo jigs and a tank full of mackerel, and we'd slow troll mackerel while everyone was fishing sand bass and catch yellows, and we'd yo-yo up some bass, and it was just out there in the mud, and you'd kind of like meter around, slow trolling until you found a big blob, like you said, and just start dropping iron.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yellow on the mackerel like that.
Yeah, we were slow trolling the max, and it was every trip we'd go in the afternoons, we would at least hook a yellow, slow trolling the mackerels, and we were fishing like 20 and 30 pound back then. We weren't keen on fishing heavy line. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's always a small yellows you hook trolling a mackerel, isn't it?
Not always. No, we'd get some big ones.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like if you hook one on the slow troll mackerel, it's like a 40-pounder.
I know. It's the best way to catch them, I'm telling you.
Yeah. It was funny that, off the salt there, the salt piles at Cedros Island, the guys would just drag those mackerel around there, and that's how you get the really big yellows at Cedros.
It's one of my favorite ways to go fish cat or clemente is if I have the time the day before to fill a tank of mackerel, is to go fish those islands with mackerel.
Oh, yeah. And sea
it's
bass
so fun.
That stuff too. If there's not squid around, those sea bass, they're on the mackerel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and the calico boiler rock fishing with a mackerel is insane. If you do it right and you get in tight, some very big calicos live very shallow, which everyone knows, but yeah. People seem to forget they eat mackerel too.
Oh, they eat what they can get, especially the big ones on the beach, like that right in the surf line.
Oh, yeah. They're so fun. So
I like fishing that barracuda because it's on the iron like that, on the surface iron. You just stand there and wait from the you see a couple turns picking and you throw out in front of them and drag through there. The funny thing about barracuda, though, is when you get bit, you just keep winding hard. Just wind. Don't stop and pump. Just wind. You can wind that fish clear to the boat and throw it on before the thing ever turns.
Oh, yeah.
They just basically swim themselves in.
I hope by September, October, we start seeing some logs, even if it's at the islands or whatever, but some of those real big ones that I remember as a kid catching.
It's funny, over the years fishing barracuda, it seemed like there'd be a big, strong year class, and then you just watch that year class come through year after year for 2 or 3 years running. And that final year, there wasn't as many of those big ones, as many fish, but they were the huge ones.
Yeah.
They were
exactly,
huge.
Yeah. And even the sport boats down here, there's been a few legals caught local. I don't think they're seeing them in big schools or anything.
Oh, yeah.
I know they're looking for them every trip down the beach.
Yeah.
They're looking on the outside.
I'm not sure that there's some fast fishing down there on that strip of coastline from Dana's down below Oceanside. Finding, the bigger fishes, that's a challenge in that area for whatever reason, unless you're looking for sea bass.
That's one thing I haven't got out to do this year is sea bass fish. And
have you seen those counts coming in from the Channel Islands?
I have.
It's impressive. And it's like squidfish is fish. There's commercial squid off of Eagle's Roost, the last I looked. It was really good enough for commercial guys to go and set up behind Anacapa there too for a while. There's plenty for bait. Guys are going out there and making that bait. It's pretty clear that they're knocking the pants off the halibut up there all the way at Miguel if they can get the weather for it.
Yeah, fishing's just it's doing good right now, and it's we're sitting here talking about it, and it's making me want to go. I'll tell you that right now.
If there was a time to take a kid out local fishing, now is it.
Yeah, I have my son. He's 4 years old, and we've taken him out a few times this year. He's out on the boat a lot, so he gets to fish quite a bit. I haven't taken him this year to just anchor up on the kelp and do the calico thing, just because I haven't had the drive to do it. I've been trying to chase this bluefin, and I think my next trip out's going to be a family day on the kelp line, fishing for calicos and hoping a yellow comes through.
Yeah.
There has been some big ones local, and this time last year I had quite a little run on some nice fish, and I just need to get going, go fishing. That's what it comes down to right now is just get out there and go fishing, and don't follow the boats around. Go do your own program. Yeah. Have a game plan in your head and change it as the day goes.
A lot of the private boat guys, what they do is whatever the party boats are doing, they won't buy a ticket, but they'll follow a party boat with a scoop of bait when they could be on that boat with 30 scoops of bait.
Yeah, it's weird to me to try to fish a fleet of party boats, unless it's really biting and there's a parking lot. But to go follow around a boat like that, you could have paid less than half the money to just hop on one of those boats.
But see, what happens is that other places get forgotten about. So
yeah,
if you wanted to catch a big sand bass on Isers, everybody's piled up over chasing those barracuda. There's your chance. You want to take a shot at pulling a yellow out of the mussel farm? You don't hear anything about that. It's everybody who's fishing it's on the DL. They're not saying anything. You could get a chance to fish that for a few hours in the morning without a bunch of traffic, I'm sure, right now.
Yeah, there's some fun fishing to be had, I'm sure, in so many places where guys just aren't even thinking about doing anything.
So there's plenty of opportunity, whether or not you're, in the thick of the fleet or if you're looking for your own thing or whatever. It's good. 72-degree water pretty much everywhere down south. It's 68 here out of Santa Barbara.
Have you done any calico fishing lately?
I'm going
up
tomorrow.
there?
I'm going to go on the Island Tack.
Are you?
Basically, it's a spin-off group from Ellie Rod and Reel.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, one of the guys, Alan Dunn, called me last night, says he's up with his family at Bass Lake and staying up there. And if I wanted, I could have his spot. And he gave me his spot. He gave it to me. So
wow.
Fishing. If you can figure out how to set your schedule up to be on that boat the day after tomorrow or tomorrow, go.
Of course you're going to do it.
So I figured it out, and I'm going to grab my bass stuff and go. And I think I'll bring a big sinker just in case we end up fishing a sea bass on the bottom somewhere.
Yeah, there's been quite a few of that one. That was happening up here. It was a lot of or down here. There was quite a bit of sea bass for a little bit there, and I'm sure they're still around. There's no kelp.
Is it all gone now? In on the beach?
Like Mateo doesn't have kelp anymore. San Mateo Point. There's very little. There's a little bit on the inside. Some of the artificial stuff's starting to grow kelp, and there's a little bit at creek, but it's just there's no big edges where I would want to set up. There's a couple little ones you could set up on, but there's nothing like, 4 years ago. What was the last time there was kelp on Clemente or at San Mateo?
Yeah.
It just hasn't grown back. When we had the cool water all winter and just not sure what's going on. I'm not, I guess get a diver down. How many sea urchins are there?
Especially on, they found this out on the San Onofre Reef, the Wheeler North Reef, the one off of, just above the, like San Clemente, the artificial reef.
Yeah.
What happens is when the rock is bare, the kelp gets there first. When the kelp grows, and then all the hydrocorals start to come in as well. The hydrocorals actually are somehow able to displace that kelp. So if the hydrocorals are on there and the kelp has a bad time because, if there's not good nutrient-rich water for a while and it's all that warm, clear stuff,
the
kelp doesn't do very well in it. So,
and that's the hydrocorals. That's the white stuff that you're seeing on the leaves of the kelp.
No, it's actually the little bushes. I'm sure you snagged it, but they're like orange bushes.
Okay.
There's kind of flat purple ones and orange bushy ones, and kind of these big fleshy looking brown ones. There's at least 3 different common varieties. So what they've discovered What happened is that if there'd be a big winter swell, it would knock all that off. The hydrocorals would be off because it's in fairly shallow water, 40 feet or so. You'd blow it all off. And if there was good nutrient, green water for the winter, green cold water for the wintertime, then the kelp would start again. And then so long as there's good nutrient-rich water down at 40 feet and warm water over the top, even with warm water over the top, you get really good, robust kelp growth. So that was that. It was a whole kind of seasonal succession of things going on that caused there to be, lots and lots of kelp. And by the same token, when things are different, it can lead to a situation like now where you don't see the kelp. And then sometimes the kelp will be there. You'll see it on the meter. It just won't be hitting the surface.
Yeah.
And the difference could be whether or not it's high tide or not, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I've noticed I'm seeing kelp in areas that I hadn't seen kelp in a long time. And then I'm seeing no kelp in some of these areas where I'm used to, setting up for a good calico bite or setting up for a good sea bass bite. These big main spots, there's 3 or 4 of them that we like to fish up there down here. And those spots don't have kelp, but there's new little patches here and there and stuff growing that I guess maybe you just never noticed because you were blinded by going to the big spots. So I've been trying to fish all that small stuff, the scattered stuff, and it's been decent fishing. It's just maybe this weekend I'll go try to crack the code here.
Yeah, and not only that, those fish will be all over that hard bottom.
Oh yeah, last year I was fishing a zone. It was just cobble, not much relief where there's normally lots of kelp, and there's no kelp, and I could fish 20-pound. We were fishing 20-pound for a few days there, and we were landing these yellows that were like 30 pounds because there was no kelp around.
Oh, that's awesome.
But they would only eat 20-pound. A really good sardine and 20-pound they'd eat if we chummed enough. They wouldn't touch 30 or 40-pound.
That's so funny.
Yeah, but they were big ones, big bruiser, home guard, yellowtail, and those are the ones you want to catch, right?
Yeah. So me and Wendy Tochihara have this ongoing debate about fluorocarbon. Turns out fluorocarbon leader, though it's more transparent in the water, is a lot bigger for its strength than monofilament.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll find that you can fish 40-pound fluoro, and it will be so much thicker than, say, 20-pound mono, that it's a huge difference. But the strength of the line will be real close, because 40-pound fluoro breaks at 40 pounds, but 20-pound monofilament breaks at like 36.
Yeah, it stretches.
Yeah. And so she says, just go down to, smaller size mono. And then I was fishing down in your neck of the woods there with 40-pound fluoro leader. And the mackerel and stuff there's mackerel and bass and all kinds all together. There's two other guys and Wendy on the boat. They were fishing lighter monofilament, and I fished that fluoro. And instantly those mackerel would kill the bait. But once it was dead, they wouldn't bite it. It was kind of picky that way. However, once they would quit hammering on the bait, the little bass would come up, and they would eat the bait. So you're fishing a dead bait, a killed bait, right on the surface with this foam of fish all the way around it. Those bass would eat the 40-pound fluoro better than like 12-pound mono.
Oh, really?
So at that point, I became a believer in fluoro, despite the fact that you're advocating that guys that maybe don't know how to tie a knot, that they put an extra connection that can fail in their whole system.
Yeah, that's 100% true. My take on fluoro and mono is I use fluorocarbon for very niche things such as abrasion resistance. Maybe I could become a believer that they see it or they don't, but I fish clear monofilament 90% of the time. And I'll do short fluoro leaders when I'm fishing tuna with live bait, fishing smaller lures for tuna. But there's something about fishing straight mono that I cannot seem to get myself away from. Other than like the calico bass fishing, I did a lot of tournament calico bass fishing, and I'd fished obviously the short top shots and the short 2 to 4 foot leaders. But my leader material was usually mono, heavy mono. It's so much more economical to fish too.
Yep, you just put a whole bunch of it on there. Put like a cast's worth plus a little bit, so you can lose a little.
Yeah, and even like my my gear on the charter boat when I was fishing was mainly my main set of 4 bread and butter rods when we were fishing yellows and the smaller grade tuna was 30-pound mono, and it was so forgiving to my anglers. I felt that we landed more fish than the fluorocarbon and the and the zero stretch stuff.
Yeah, forgiving is really the right word. I mean, you can point the rod straight at the fish with the mono, and the line still stays tight. It doesn't go slack and have the hook get thrown, and it doesn't get torn out as much because there's a little bit of give. And you can make a cast with it and not be that good at casting and not get a big nasty tangle like braid. If it's actually pretty darn tricky to cast with braid unless you've got cast control.
Yeah, a lot of guys, and that's one thing that on all my bass gear would be an issue, is I would have a customer say they could cast, and I always would have to tell them, I have all the brakes are off. I do this every day. Just know, keep your thumb on that spool, because it's gonna wind up on you.
Yeah.
But yeah, the mono fishing has been good. And I've been doing a lot of small spinning rods too for my bass fishing for the customers. And that's all straight braid for the most part with short top shots, but those are parabolic, bass rods that we've actually landed quite a few big fish on those. Some big yellows and some big sea bass on that gear.
Spinning gear is better than it's ever been. I mean,
and a little 4,000. I'm talking a 4,000 size reel fishing for bass, and we hooked a 62-pound sea bass just a couple years back on a Zoom Super Fluke and over some hard bottom. And I thought it was black for sure, and it came up chrome and purple, and I was like, no way. How did you just, a little short piece of 20-pound mono on the end.
But, Russ Iser, he had a charter group, the LA Rod and Reel, back in the day. They did fish bass and stuff like that. He switched them all over to spinning. They would all come out with spinning gear, and they could cast. And they knocked the bass that way. And when I first started carrying that charter group, they would come out with their spinning gear, and we would shake our heads. Holy moly, where'd these guys come from? They have all spinning tackle. And it would be Wednesday. We had been catching, decent bass. But they'd come out on Wednesday, limits. Bam. And you watch, and you look at the average length of the cast that they would make, fly lining an anchovy. And they could actually fly line an anchovy with a spinning reel.
Oh, yeah.
It was a good 30% longer than any of the guys throwing conventional, except for people who fished every day like crew.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's changing on the West Coast is the amount of spinning rods you're seeing, not just out on the boats, but in the tackle shops being pushed, as it's kind of it's for whatever reason on the East Coast, they figured it out a little sooner than us.
Yeah.
On that.
I tried to catch a tuna on a spinning rod and it about killed me though.
Did it?
I must be too old or something because the only thing I could think of is how am I going to lay this rod on the rail? And I couldn't do it with the spinning rod.
That's true. That's very true. When that stuff rushed the beach just before, 2 weeks ago, we were fishing the spinning rod and the small poppers. The small clear poppers seem to have been doing the best. And a small spinning, or not a small spinning rod, I mean, it's a 7-foot spinning rod I think it's a jigging rod rated to, 50 to 80 pound or whatever, but a pretty light parabolic spinning rod with a good reel. And we were just hosing on those bluefin, getting them in so quick because you could pull so hard on a short rod. And that's what killed me last week was I grabbed my 9-footer for whatever reason. And I didn't have a real rail. I was on a skiff.
Oh yeah. I've caught a couple of bluefin on a 10-foot rod here now recently. It's gnarly.
It's not fun.
It's gnarly, especially, and it was like straight braid to a fluoro leader, and I just knew that I had to keep the rod tip up. I couldn't. It was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had several just kick my butt too.
Oh yeah, totally.
They kicked my butt
man.
and left me crying.
Yeah, that was my last experience on the bluefin fishing was tail between my legs coming back to the harbor. I was humbled. And when we got a look at that fish, it was a 100-pounder. It was right there.
Oh my God.
I'd say 80 to 120 pounds. It was right there. It was a big fish. And we had him within 40 feet of the boat on the surface 4 times that day. And that's all she wrote.
I'd be looking at those foamers. It's funny how your attitude changes about what's what. I'd be looking at those foamers and I'd be going, oh, those are small enough. I think those are small enough. And you get up there and go like, they're not that small.
Yeah. Well, what killed me is I had the 60-pound rod set up in the rack and I grabbed the 9-footer. I had the 7.5-foot Wahoo bomb rod that would have just fought that fish just fine, with 60 pound and a 2-speed. And I grabbed an old Trinidad 30.
Yeah. With a long rod, you about have to have the 2-speed because you're not going to last long enough to be able to just not rail the rod. And if you rail the rod, you have to be able to switch it in low gear at the end and put some freaking torque on that fish.
And that was the problem. And I broke the reel because I was torquing on it so hard. I actually bent the handle, the drive essentially. And I bent that out because I was torquing so hard on it.
Oh yeah.
Because the ratio was so high. And I just couldn't move the fish when he'd get down into that thermocline and recharge.
Yeah.
He was just doing his thing. So, well, Merit, I think, that was a good conversation. It's always good talking. I'm excited for fall already.
We'll have to make a plan.
Definitely. All right, guys, that's going to conclude episode 27 of the Western Outdoor News Podcast. Remember, if you're looking for trips, charters, or any events with Western Outdoor News, check out wonews.com.